Welcome to our Line Opinion panelists for the week. Joining us at the virtual roundtable, we have Tom Garrity of the Garrity Group Public Relations. We're welcoming Algernon Damassa, editor at the Deming Headlight, and always glad to have Inez Russell Gomez. She is editorial page editor at the Santa Fe New Mexican. Thank you all for joining us. Now, the PRC nominating committee has sent 9 names to the governor for her consideration for the new 3-person public regulation commission. Of the 9 nominated, 7 live in New Mexico, 5 are Democrats, 3 are declined to state, and 1 nominee is a Republican. All 9 have energy work experience. Now, we won't get into the names of all 9 nominees and kind of parse that out, but broadly first, Tom, let me start this. Is this process, the process other than the names, shaping up the way it was intended when we think back to how the vote went down, what folks were expecting?
Yeah, wow. Well, there's I think what was intended and what actually occurred, and not necessarily what was intended, but I think the process that Representative Egoff was able to facilitate, I think has brought about it brought about 15 very strong candidates, now 9 very strong candidates. So from that perspective, I think that process worked to really develop some people who really have, their wherewithal with respect to energy issues, environment, FERC, and all the different aspects of the industry. And I think who have some good knowledge of different aspects of New Mexico, not the entire state of New Mexico. I think that has been brought up by many, but I think that the initial process has been successful.
Tom, let me ask you this, just real quick. How do we know, or in your opinion, that they are strong candidates? Meaning, was there a list of attributes we were looking for all of these nominees that the checklist has basically been checked off?
No, and that's just it. There weren't any necessarily job qualifications. There were intentions as far as, there was and there was an actual document, I believe, that actually listed, the types of things that needed to be included. But for the most part, there's sometimes in different processes, you have what's listed and then there's what's wanted.
Sure.
And I think that this process checked the box of what was listed and then brought about the candidates that were wanted.
Inez, I got an interesting question here. One notable name left off the final list of 9 nominees was current PRC Commissioner Cynthia Hall. Sorry about that, Cynthia. Interview with Source New Mexico, Ms. Hall said her experience would have been valuable. Your columnist at your newspaper, Simon Milan Simonich, had a great column this week about this very issue. Was the idea to just have a clean start no matter who was on the PRC beforehand, or are we missing something when it comes to institutional knowledge and an independent thinker, as Ms. Hall proved herself to be?
That's a very good point. I do think they wanted a clean start because one of the reasons the constitutional amendment was presented to begin with, which was to move from elected to appointed, is the idea that by joining the vast majority of states, which also appoint the regulatory commissions, we would leave something that's been kind of messy and controversial behind. And even though I think the current PRC has done a good job in terms of being scandal-free, working hard, a really diligent body. If you go back to the days of the Corporation Commission, if you go through the PRC, every 3 years there's a new explosion of embarrassment.
Right.
And I think they did want to maybe start over. And who knows in the interviews what they found in someone's qualifications that made them think, well, this person's going to be better. Now, obviously, Cynthia Hall is eminently qualified to be on the PRC, and why they didn't include her along the way, we could only know if we could get inside the brains of the people doing the interviews.
Your columnist sort of surmised it might have been because of her votes, tough votes on PNM and other things that might have become political without her
apart from political, one of the things, we had an interesting My View today in the paper by someone named Glenn Lyons, who was also an applicant and didn't make it all the way to the finalist. And he said, this is a great group of people. I think you guys have done a good job. So even though I'm not one of them, I think this is going to be great. And he has said, and what I've heard from PNM and other people who are regulated, and also from, consumers, is that you need a PRC that is predictable. Whichever way it goes, it's almost not as important whether they're one way or the other way. You have to know that if they promise Facebook they're going to do X, that they don't change their mind and then say, no, we're going to do Y now. So I think that's part of it. Is it's not just, it sounds great, we took a tough vote. Well, you took a tough vote and then you changed your mind a year later and no one knows what you're doing. And I think they need a predictable PRC that you don't always know what they're going to do, but they make sense.
Algernon, another interesting wrinkle here is native representation has been a concern from the start of this process, no doubt. Ron Lovato, former two-term governor of Ohkay-Owingeh, a member of the nominating committee, and one of the 9 nominees is Joseph Little. He's an attorney from Mescalero Apache tribe. He's got experience in water rights and tribal governments, of course. Is Mr. Little's perspective necessary on the PRC, or it doesn't have to be him or her, just some kind of native perspective on the PRC? Is that a necessary thing we have to have at this point?
Without question, Mr. Little has perspective that is of value, but I think another thing here is we have to talk about trust in the body, public trust in the body.
Right.
And, with the constitutional change, we're not taking the politics out of the process. We're just shifting the way the politics work when we have an appointed body rather than an elected body. When you have PRC members running campaigns, certain issues dominate and certain issues get neglected. The PRC has a broad portfolio. They don't just regulate utility companies. They have a broad portfolio of services and things that they regulate. And so by making it an appointed body, you're shifting the way the politics work. But we get not only into the necessity of Native American representation, but we also have to, I think people who look like me sometimes assume that there is a Native American perspective, but we have, 23 nations and pueblos in this state, and they don't all have the same views and same opinions. And so now we start to have a conversation about which tribe, which pueblo, which nation needs to be representative on the body. And so you're just changing the way the politics work. You're not taking politics out of the process.
That's a fair point right there. Especially to buttress Algernon's point there, we only have 3. You can't really spread the sort of geography and everything, all the backgrounds amongst just 3 instead of 5. Tom, there's a controversy, got to get into this, over outgoing House Speaker Brian Egolf's involvement in the nominating committee. Late last week, the State Ethics Commission found Egolf was in violation of the state law and the state constitution when he nominated himself for the committee. Does that finding call into the legitimacy of the process into question here?
I don't think it. If the process was flawed, then I think that we'd have reason to jump in and criticize the process. But Representative Egolf, and the reason I'm saying representative as opposed to Speaker of the House is because he's in this role as representative. He was the one who really ran the process, and it was by people who watched. People said that he did a very good job. So from that perspective, I think there was no problem with, what he did in his role. Where it comes into issue is the Governmental Conduct Act and just the ethics in that, which is why Representative Miguel Garcia was really upset over Representative Egolf appointing himself to that particular board, and I think he was equally as upset with the Ethics Commission for just reaching an agreement with the Representative Egolf as opposed to doing a full investigation. And I think that the ethics team did the right thing as far as hey, let's work this out. I don't think there's a need for a huge investigation. People who watch this process on a regular basis kind of scratched their heads when we all saw the appointment, but we all kind of knew at that point that he had already acknowledged that he wasn't going to be running again. So it was just a unfortunate subtitle to this whole kind of narrative, so to speak.
Inez, let me ask you this about Mr. Egolf, though, but he resigned from the nominating panel pretty soon after voting on the finalists. I just, something about that just doesn't sit. And don't forget, that same day, the lawyer of the State Ethics Commission finally made that preliminary decision on the situation Tom just mentioned from Mr. Garcia, and we have that from the commission. We'll put that up on our website a little bit later today. But Inez, I have to ask again, did Mr. Egolf take the right approach here, and were we served by this approach?
I think that in most cases, it's probably best not to appoint yourself. But I also understand that someone who knows as much as he knows about everything might think, well, I'm just the best guy to do it, so I'm leaving, so why not? And, you know, he resigned after the finalists were chosen because the finalists are chosen. His work is done. In a perfect world, there would have been somebody else that he would have picked, and we wouldn't be having this discussion.
But does it make it seem, Algernon, just a couple seconds here, that this thing is political? When you have a political person nominating himself and then resigning on his own as well, you know what I mean? It just doesn't feel right if you're looking for a political problem here.
Exactly right, and that's why the government, that's why we have the Conduct Act, right? And helpfully, now we have this independent body, the State Ethics Commission, that can step in and say, this is about what the law says. It's not about the politics. But the timing of it was such that Representative Egolf was able to just say, "Oh, okay, our work is done anyway," and leave without going through the process.
It's very Santa Fe, as they say. Thanks to our line opinion panel on that one. We'll meet back here in a little over 10 minutes to talk through the state's plan to bring thousands of government employees back to the office to start 2023.